De mare.
Greetings, family around the world. Hello, this is Ava Montgomery from Conscious Media Consulting, LLC. And I'm so thankful and grateful that you're here to join me today to talk about one of my favorite subjects, which is media literacy, and in particular, conscious media literacy, which I will get into the explanations of those in just a minute. But before I begin, I want to welcome you all, and I want to thank Dima and Alexandra for putting this Africa Week together. There's been a lot of insightful content, and I hope to contribute to that today. And I also want to express my appreciation because I know there's a lot going on in the world, a lot of different pandemics, COVID, racial pandemics, economic pandemics, all climate pandemics, all kinds of things are going on. So before I get started, I want to express condolences to anyone that has suffered through any of those pandemics or has lost a loved one due to COVID or any form of violence. All right, so that's out of the way. I hope that you are ready to enjoy an insightful and participate in an insightful conversation on media literacy, and in particular, the cultural aspects of media literacy that we need to know for the African diaspora. And we're gonna learn some tips about acquiring media literacy skills through the reading of a fable called Gloria, the Unacknowledged Beauty. So before we get started, I'm going to share my screen so I can lay some groundwork for you for what media literacy is and how it can help us navigate today's climate of false media, fake media, and manipulated discourses. So I hope everyone can see my screen. Again, I'm from Conscious Media Consulting, LLC, and we are a thought leader in conscious content creation. And
sorry to interrupt, Ava. We're not seeing the screen yet. Would you mind stop sharing and sharing again?
Yeah, sure. Thank you for letting me know. Okay. Let's see. Okay.
Here we are.
Okay. Can you see?
Well, we're seeing a multiple share, but not the actual presentation like it was.
I think it's just taking a little delay.
We got it.
All right, great.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right. So, as I said, I'm with Conscious Media Consulting, LLC, and Conscious Media Consulting, LLC is a thought leader in conscious content creation. We advise content creators, media sponsors, and promoters on how to create content that is accurate in narratives and representations so that they can avoid creating problematic content that causes offense. And so we do that through several services. We have our content media project consulting, our media literacy professional development training, our facilitated fables, which we do as a service of conscious conversations initiation, media commentary and thought leadership for podcasts and other guest commentary, and we provide customized keynote speaking and presentations. And we also do a conscious indicators inventory for websites. And then we have our own in-house publications and media, and we're going to get to that shortly. So before we do that, though, I want to talk about what is media. Oftentimes, media is generalized into just one big thing. People will say, I hate media, or media is the enemy. And that's really not the case. We really need to, for our benefit, be able to understand what is this big ball of wax called media and break it down so that we can hold people accountable at the right places. So media is content. That includes text, including lyrics to songs, talk, imaging, imagination in imaging, and symbolism to include signs. So those are the content that creates media. Then we have platforms that deliver the systems of text, talk, imaging, symbolism. And then we have people. So we have like newscasters, content creators, actors, reporters, journalists. Those are the people that bring us media. And it's really important to make those distinctions so that when we have a problem with media, we can look to see whether it was a problem with the platform, or perhaps it was the way something was written, or maybe the way something was edited. So we need to be able to be more specific instead of just saying media is problematic. We need to understand what part of the media process is problematic. And that helps us to be able to listen in, watch out, and word up with media effectively. So what is media literacy? Media literacy is becoming a more commonly known term, but still, I wouldn't say everyone knows what it is. But media literacy, according to the National Association for Media Literacy Education, is the ability to access, analyze, evaluate, create, and act using all forms of communications. And so those forms of communications were what I just talked about in terms of the different types of media content, text, talk, imaging, and symbolism. And I make the distinction between media literacy and conscious media literacy because through my research and studies, I found that people might be able to access, analyze, evaluate, create, and act using all forms of media, but there still is problematic content that is created unintentionally. And that we believe, though, that happens because there is a disconnect between historical messaging and current messaging. So content creators don't have enough cultural knowledge or conscious knowledge of being able to see errors. And so the conscious media literacy requires several steps, but there's one that I really want to highlight and give an example of. So conscious media literacy skills would include the ability to articulate how and why content, or media as it's mostly known as, is problematic, or why content can be reasonably perceived as problematic or received as problematic. Upon a reasonable analysis, that historically false narratives and misrepresentations can reasonably be considered to be present. And I say reasonably because we are in a climate and environment where everything can be picked apart and fault can be found with everything. But that's not necessarily reasonable. So for an example, there was a beer company that created a commercial and had the tagline, lighter is better. So if you're conscious about the history of narratives and messaging and representations of the United States and Western cultures as a whole, you know that white has always been conditioned to be right. And the lighter you are, the closer to white you are, the better. And so when people saw that commercial, particularly because in the commercial, a beer, and it was a commercial for light beer. So the tagline was in reference to the beer, not to a person. But in the imaging of the commercial, the beer was slid past a brown skinned Black woman to a lighter complected and I'm not sure if she was even Black, but to someone who wasn't Black or who was very light complexion. So when people saw that and they heard the tagline, lighter is better, it was reasonably confusing as to whether they were talking about the beer or whether they were using coded language to talk about a person. And so that's when I say reasonable, we need to look at things through a reasonable lens. So in that case, given the history of 400 years of conditioning of a false dominant narrative regarding race, that was a reasonable, there was reason to look at that with a side eye, and people did. But being able to articulate how and why that content is problematic is part of the process of being conscious and being aware of how cultures have been, especially cultures of color and women, have been presented in media over the last 400 years. So here's some key concepts of media literacy that are just helpful to know when you're watching TV, when you're listening to something, or when you're reading something. Metaphors often present, and metaphors are a thing that is regarded as representative or symbolic of something else, especially something that may be considered an abstract concept. Play on words and a turn of phrase, which is my favorite, and these appear a lot in the content that I create, are a humorous or witty way of using a word or phrase so that more than one meaning is suggested, associated with it, or can be derived from that play on words. And then there are phrases, which are pretty common, also called expressions, that words taken together make a conceptual unit. And then symbols are a thing that represents or stands for something else. So we see even emojis are symbols. A smiley face is a symbol. And then there's symbolism, which is the use of symbols or ideas to represent ideas or qualities. And so those also present in content a lot. And in my content that I create, I like to use them in positive ways. So now we're getting to the moment that you've all been waiting for, but I hope that you appreciate laying some groundwork for what media literacy is. But I want you to notice this 6 spheres of conscious concern, because they are part of the fable that I'm going to read shortly. So there's 6 spheres of conscious concern that we found at Conscious Media Consulting that problematic content usually will fall within. It will either be something problematic culturally, linguistically. It will be the way a social issue is represented incorrectly. It will be a problem with gender-based biases, or can be an inaccurate narrative or a misrepresentation. So these are the 6 spheres of which we find that when content is problematic, and now there are others, to be sure, there are others, but generally popular mainstream content generally falls within these when there are problems with it. So now we're going to get to Gloria, the Unacknowledged Beauty. And I want to tell you a little background about this story. This story was written for women and girls in general, but specifically for Black women and girls, because Black women and girls are, for the last 400 years, have been under undue pressure and scrutiny about their aesthetic. It's either appropriated, culturally, aesthetically, and ethnically appropriated, denigrated, devalued, or imitated. But when it's theirs and naturally theirs, and they're proud of it, they often are denigrated or devalued or even denied that. And that happens interracially and intraracially, unfortunately. So this story is for women and girls in general, but for Black women and girls specifically. So you'll notice in this image that Gloria, the Unacknowledged Beauty, comes with a coloring sheet, and it has a little tease line, which is beauty may or may not be confirmed by someone else, but it isn't determined by someone else. And this story is about Gloria, a uniquely beautiful vase, but for some reason, she can only guess at the reasons. She never gets a chance to shine like other vases do. And I'll be using vase and vase interchangeably because the way the sentence reads, I feel like I should change the way I use vase or vase. Just a little side note. So not being appreciated for the way we are made and not being able to shine because of someone else's opinion is difficult for Gloria to not take personally, as it would be for most anyone. So in the story, we need to find out, does Gloria let her beauty shine despite being unacknowledged and unappreciated? And so some of the key themes here in this story will be narratives, representations, beauty standards, acceptance, self-confidence, self-esteem, and so forth. And we get back to our 6 spheres of conscious concern because these fables generally will center on a theme, and these 6 spheres, or could be 2 of the 6 spheres, are what are going to present in this story. So for this story, we're going to talk about culture, gender, social issues, accurate narratives, and representations. So it only takes a few minutes fable to begin to raise consciousness instantly. And these stories are meant for consciousness raising, emotional intelligence building, and empathetic inquiry. And these are just a foundation. These are great stories, I believe, to have as a bedtime story for your child, to discuss around the dinner table, the breakfast table, even in the workplace. It's just a nice way to be able to initiate a conversation about something that may be sensitive, but that is something that we as a society need to be able to address and deal with and learn from. So these are just the beginning of a story. It lays a plot line for you, but you can always build on the story and go with it into a different place entirely if you want. But this is just for people who aren't really comfortable creating a story or initiating a conversation. This is a place to start. So cheers. So let's meet the characters, and I'll ask you to pay a particular attention to the aesthetics of the characters. Hello, my name is Gloria. I'm beautiful. At first, I was forced to spend most of my time shining in a closet. One day, someone came along and gave me a chance to shine out in the open. So that's Gloria. And if you look at Gloria, you see she has lots of beautiful details about her. Hello, we are 6 lovely vases. Our beauty is not really more beautiful than Gloria's, but we are sure made to feel that way. Sometimes, though, even we are made to feel that as we are not enough. So if you look at these 6 vases, you see that they're similar in mold and design, but there's some handcraftedness going on. And we'll talk a little bit later about what that could possibly represent, the handcraftedness on the vases. If you'd like, you can read along with me or just listen. If you'd like, you could also, if it's safe for you to do, close your eyes and imagine the scene and the setting. But if you read along with me, then you'll actually get your brain more engaged by having to follow along, comprehend what's being said, and also use your imagination to envision these people or the setting and the characters. So if you'd like to read along, I've provided some prompts so that you know where I'm at when I'm reading the story. All right, so before we go, I'm going to grab a sip of my tea. Prepare to get my characters on, because when you're reading, especially to children, it's very good to change your intonation when you can, especially if there are not pictures, so that they can envision the different characters as they enter the scene. So we'll start. Gloria was such a beautiful vase, but for years, no one appreciated her beauty. For a long time, she tried mightily to get the attention she deserved. Long ago, when Paula and Paula Pitts married, they received 7 lovely vases as wedding gifts. After saving money for some time, the Pitts were able to purchase a large, lovely house in a lovely location. That house had lots of rooms for which to set out the lovely vases. Because they lived in a climate with beautiful weather throughout the year, Mrs. Pitts was able to maintain a magnificent flower garden. Mrs. Pitts would pick several bouquets of flowers each week and then place them in vases. She would then place them throughout their lovely home. Mrs. Pitts was appreciative for having so many containers to keep flowers. However, although she had 7 lovely vases, Mrs. Pitts only used 6 of them. The 7th unused vase was marked Gloria at the base. Gloria was a uniquely beautiful vase. She had an internal shine. Her internal shine made her external coloring simply glow like a beacon. Gloria the vase was full-bodied with enough room to hold lots of water that could nourish lots of flowers for weeks at a time. She also had hand-painted flowers and lots of other unique details about her. Anyone and everyone could clearly see that Gloria was a glorious stunner for sure. Yet Mrs. Pitts didn't seem to appreciate Gloria's beauty. Maybe it was because Gloria's unique design and intricate detailing made her stand out among the others. Maybe Mrs. Pitts thought Gloria was too different from the rest. Maybe Gloria was unappreciated because her style always changed the look and feel of a room when she was in it. Gloria couldn't say for sure why. She just knew that she wasn't acknowledged or favored like the other vases. Maybe it was because although those 6 vases were unique in their own way, they also had a similar look to each other, as if they were made from the same mold. So it was off into a corner of a guest room closet that Gloria was put. She didn't even have the fortune to be put on a shelf. Funnily enough, every time Mrs. Pitts would close the closet door, it would pop open after she left. For months, each time she was put there, Gloria would roll herself out of the closet. Then she'd make her way into the living room or the kitchen. Gloria would roll herself into the center of the room in hopes that Mrs. Pitts would pick her up and give her a chance to hold flowers. But Mrs. or Mr. Pitts would just pick her up and with a puzzled look would say, "How did you get out here?" Then they would tuck her away somewhere until they could put her back in the closet. The years flew by this way. The curious thing is that occasionally Mrs. Pitts would take one of the other 6 vases down from the shelf and paint flowers or some other details on them. She'd say to a vase, "I think you would be just a little more beautiful with some more detailing." So she would pull out her markers or paints and draw flowers and stuff on the vases. Then she'd stand back and admire her handiwork. Sometimes she would frown because it wasn't very handy, and sometimes she would smile, impressed by how artsy she was. Meanwhile, Gloria would silently and sadly say to herself, "But I already have flowers and unique details. You don't have to change a thing about me. Give me an opportunity to make your home shine." Upon hearing her silent cry, some of the other vases would turn up their roses at Gloria. They seemed secretly glad that she was kept in a closet. One morning, Gloria overheard Mr. and Mrs. Pitts talking about their daughter's upcoming wedding. "Paul, haven't we always wanted to live full-time in our beachfront vacation home? How do you feel about giving the house to Olivia as her wedding present? Maybe now is the time to make the move," Mrs. Pitts said excitedly. "I think that's a great idea. But the wedding is in just 4 weeks. We can't pack up the house in that short amount of time." Mr. Pitts became frantic at the idea. Well, we can just give them the house as is. We'll leave the furniture, decor, pots, pans, plants and all, Mrs. Pitt said, giggling as she sipped her tea and imagined the feel of her feet in the sand. All right, let's give it a go. Let's get Livy downstairs to see how she feels about our plan, Mr. Pitt said, with relief as he turned the page of his newspaper and took a bite of his muffin. At that point, Olivia was still living at home with her parents. Olivia and her fiancé, James, were both shocked and elated when they heard that her parents were offering Olivia's childhood home to them as their wedding present. A short time later, Olivia and James had their wedding and went on a lovely honeymoon. In the interim, Gloria the Vase used the time being closeted to maintain her beauty. She did that because even if no one else told her she was beautiful, she knew everything about her was worth caring for. When they returned, James and Olivia began rearranging the house to their liking. Eventually, Olivia made her way into the guest room where she found Gloria in the corner of the closet. At first, Olivia was in awe. She had only seen such a beautiful vase in magazines and on TV. "James," Olivia called out, "look what I found hidden in the closet," she exclaimed as he ran into the room. "Whoa, what an extraordinary vase," James said appreciatively as he and Olivia looked upon Gloria in amazement. Olivia remarked, "Only Mother Nature's beauty is a fitting complement for this vase's natural beauty." She then went straight away to the garden where she picked breathtaking bunches of flowers. She brought them into the house and filled Gloria and the other 6 vases up with lavish natural beauty. Then she carefully selected a room for each of the vases to decorate in their own special way. Olivia placed Gloria atop the kitchen table where she and James could appreciate her day and night during meals. That place of honor is where Gloria gloriously remained. The end. Now I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that we can have a little bit of discussion. And I want you to tell me, if you can, in the comments, what you think the moral of the story is. And I think my camera is on a little bit of a delay, or my is on a little bit of a delay for stopping to share. Okay. So let's see. Welcome, Olivia, coming from New York. Do we have any one in the comments that might be able to tell us what you think the moral of the story is? All right, I won't keep you in suspense for long. I do have a moral of the story, and this is one that I created for the story, but given the whole story and the way you perceive it and interpret it, you might have a different moral. But for me, the moral of the story is beauty is as beauty does. And beauty is not just limited to what we see on the outside. Always believe in your own beauty and know that people who truly appreciate beauty appreciate and acknowledge that beauty comes in a diversity of forms. Yes, Olivia, thank you very much. Yes, that your beauty will be appreciated by the right people. And generally, the right people are people who appreciate beauty in lots of different forms. It's not about one standard mold of beauty. So I'm going to share my camera again because we have some more of the fable to discuss. And let's see. Okay. Oh, gonna have to go back to. Oh no, let me see if I can just go to the page. Oh. No, it won't let me. Little bit of technical difficulties, but that's okay. When you read these stories, you'll get it perfectly. Okay. All right, so let's reflect on the story a little bit. Gloria was a beautiful vase, and for years, no one acknowledged how beautiful she was. And not only did the non-acknowledgement limit her exposure, it limited how helpful she could be. And so she wasn't given the opportunity to hold flowers and decorate the house like the other vases were. She wasn't living up to her potential or what she was created to do. And so at first she tried mightily to get the attention she deserved. And we saw that through her popping out of the closet, rolling into the living room or the kitchen, trying to bring awareness of herself. But after seeing that that wasn't going to work, she realized that she could appreciate her own beauty. She didn't need somebody else to do that. And so she maintained her pride in herself and kept up herself for when Olivia came and would acknowledge her. And so while beauty is said to be in the eye of the beholder, sometimes people choose to see beauty in something or someone that they don't want to acknowledge or appreciate in another. And maybe that's because they are used to seeing beauty defined as only one way. And we see that happen all the time in different aspects of media, whether it's in imaging, whether it's the way characters are selected, whether they are created to be lighter or white, or they're seen as bad if they are dark complected or black. So we see there's conditioning as to what is seen as beautiful in the media all the time. Who gets put on magazine covers, who gets selected to be in videos. Okay. And so we all have times when we can look at the media and feel really unappreciated and acknowledged. And I think, again, that's particularly true with Black women and girls. On one hand, they're constantly imitated, and on the other hand, they're constantly denied their beauty. But we can't let those negative thoughts be internalized, because it'll decrease our own self-esteem. And we don't want to give anyone the power to decrease our self-esteem uh, and how we feel about ourselves or our community, people in our culture. And some people will think that we should all look a certain way and we should all look alike. And Gloria showed us that she didn't look like the others, and she was uniquely made to shine in her own light. And so beauty cannot be defined by standards. For years and years and years, it has been defined by a narrow standard, but we need to be able to break the mold, so to speak, and be able to appreciate beauty in all of its forms, and particularly appreciate our own beauty. We don't need to shine in somebody else's light. We can shine in our own and have confidence in that. So when you think about this story, here's some questions to reflect on. Sometimes people make other people feel like they must change to be more like them. Why do you think that is? And since I can't see the comments, I'm just going to go through these questions for you to be able to think about on your own. And sometimes people try to make themselves look like someone else. Why do you think that is? Sometimes there's people are pressured to look like somebody else, and sometimes people are not pressured to look like anybody else. They just want to. And have you or someone you know depended upon the opinion of somebody else to feel beautiful and smart? And do you or people you know let their unique style shine, even if it is unusual? Or do they try to conform to what society says is beautiful, acceptable, or appropriate? And then think about, what are some things that you can do to increase the confidence you have in yourself without making changes to the things about you that make you naturally and uniquely beautiful. And again, I'm not going to go through all of these, but these stories are meant to go from a fourth grade level to an adult level of thought. So you can start with the basic questions that I've provided, or you can go even deeper and talk about some of the things that I mentioned earlier in terms of the key concepts. So, for instance, one turn of phrase or a play on words would be, you may have heard the expression "turn your nose up at something," and in the story, the 6 vases turned up their roses at Gloria. So that's a play on the words. The vases hold flowers, in this particular case, roses, and they turned up their roses as if to look down on Gloria. And also, when we think about cultural appropriation or even cosmetic surgery, when we think about how Mrs. Pitts took the vases that were very similar and made of the same mold and said, I think you would be just a little more beautiful with some detailing. Sometimes, regardless of color, and just being a woman, and sometimes men, but more so women, there is pressure to get surgery or to change something about themselves to be just a little bit more satisfactory to somebody else's eyes. So that kind of speaks to um, cosmetic surgery, but also customizing oneself to look a little different. And then we also had a phrase about a passage where Gloria was put in the closet on not on a shelf but on the floor, and that also speaks to how we can put some people on a shelf or pedestal, or we can relegate some people to, or media, I should say, not we, because we don't do that, but media can relegate some people to be cast off to the corner, to a closet, to not let them shine or to not appreciate them. So that's a play on words of coming out of the closet, being let out of the closet, being put on a shelf, and being put on a pedestal. And so these fables also come with, if you wanted to facilitate a fable for your family, for your coworkers, your friends, a specialty group, comes with a page for you to be able to create your own notes about things that you wanted to highlight in the story that you wanted to address as part of your conscious conversation. And all the fables come with a coloring sheet. And this is some information about what, if you go to our website, you can find other free resources to help develop your media literacy skills in conscious ways. This is where you can find us. We're mostly on Instagram and LinkedIn, but we also have a video, some videos on YouTube that help give some tips for conscious content creation, as well as our movie, This Is for the Birds, which also speaks to a lot of messaging through media that I don't want to give the story away. It's free to watch. And if you become a member of our website, there's a viewer's guide, a viewer's guide that you can access. But it's a really cute story too that helps invite conscious conversations. And then on Twitter at CCML Guide, but I'm not on Twitter as much. These are some of the stories that we have available for you to peruse. One is talking about getting over, Blood and Guts is talking about getting over past bad relationships and trying to start anew. We have Doggone Disinformation Disorder, which is all about media hoaxes and how to talk about fake news. And then we have Roll With It, which is about disabilities and bullying and different abilities. We have The Prideful Swallow, which is about changing your mind, taking a very firm position, but being able to change your mind. Pitch to Perfect is about asking for help. And coming soon is It Wasn't Me, which is going to be a twist on that phrase, it wasn't me. So I'm excited for that to come out. So for some more media literacy resources, you can join me for Africa 2020 later this week. And myself and 2 colleagues will be talking about the African diaspora and media representations, as well as the Critical Media Literacy Conference of the Americas is coming up on October 17th and 18th It is a free conference, and I will be presenting at that conference and talking about how content creators can use conscious media literacy skills to decolonize content. You can go to our website for more information about how to access these resources, how to register for the conference. And if you sign up, if you sign up at our website, you can access free resources there. I'm going to stop sharing, see if there's any comments. And here we go. All right. Okay, so let's see. How do we prepare our youth to produce their content, to create their own narratives and confidence? And that is such a great question, because this is what we really need to do for the culture. We need to start owning our own narratives and creating the stories that we want to be told about us, about our culture, or even about science fiction. There's so many genres that we can be in. And so for youth to start that, I think it's so much easier for them now than it was for me, let's say, when I was growing up, to create stories. I could create a story in my journal, but now we've got social media, we've got camera phones, we have really sophisticated cameras that can pretty much produce a movie. And kids are really sophisticated at using lots of different applications like TikTok and Facebook, and putting the technology together with a story and being able to broadcast it through Twitter, on Facebook, on YouTube. So I would say take advantage of the technology that's available. It's really critical that as a culture, we do that, even from just basic things like knowing how to use email, to being able to take pictures, to being able to take videos, so that we don't get caught behind the digital divide that we hear so much about. If we have the tools to be able to access them on our own, if not, when the libraries open up again, they often provide tools that patrons can use to create media as well. So take advantage of the tools, really take advantage of understanding how media works, understanding how coded language works, which are really, coded language is different than, let's say, a play on words, because a coded language is meant for a specific audience that understands how certain words are used to be denigrating to another population, in a nutshell. But whereas play on words are meant to be witty and funny, and there's no hidden agenda behind them except for to be able to take several different meanings from them. But so youth and adults need to understand how to recognize coded language, how to recognize coded symbolism, and be able to create content that corrects those kinds of narratives and imaging, and to be able to refute them, articulate why they're offensive. And so they have so many ways in which they can do that. So just preparing them to use technology. And if you want to go really, really into youth, start by reading to kids, reading to them early and often, lots of different types of books and literature. Don't just plop them in front of the TV. Actually have them reading, learning their ABCs, learning how to recognize words, like to spell words. All of that is part of media literacy and media development. And then if they are watching TV, don't let them watch it in a vacuum. Ask them questions about what they are seeing, what they're watching. What do they think about that? What's the narrative? And I'll give you a little bonus tip for how to help children begin to be media literate. So there's generally 5 ways or 5 reasons why people communicate. And that is to sell something, to inspire or motivate, to educate and inform, and to persuade, and to entertain. And I'll add a sixth one, which we're seeing a lot now, which is hate speech, or it could be love speech, but we're seeing a lot of hate speech. And so people communicate simply just to be hateful. But when children learn the basics of why somebody is communicating, or what something is being communicated to them through commercials, through books, through movies, they begin to be media literate about what is the purpose of this content, who is creating this content, why might they be creating content this way, who's being left out of the narrative, or who is being scrutinized or spotlighted in the narrative. So they start to be able to form really good questions in their mind about content, which begins the media literacy and media analysis process, so that when they start to create their own content, they can make sure they address those things. Let's see, any other questions? Okay. All right. So I think that's it for the questions. And again, I want to invite you all to Africa Week all throughout the week. But on Friday, we'll be talking about the African diaspora and media representations. And I'll be speaking specifically about how mental models are developed and how influential media is in developing mental models. And once mental models are developed, accurately or inaccurately, how they lead people to action. So I really hope that you can join us for that discussion. I know it's going to be really insightful. And yeah, check out the calendar. So thank you very much for participating with me today in my first live stream and my first time at Africa Week, but I'm so lucky that I'm going to be here 2 times. And I hope you enjoyed the story. You can go to our website and find out more information. Again, access more resources for nominal fees or for free when you sign up to become a member. You'll unlock some secret resources that will be helpful in your media literacy journey. Thank you. Be well, stay well, and wear your mask. Okay? It doesn't hurt, but it can certainly help. Especially within our community, we need to make sure that we're keeping ourselves and each other well. So wear your mask. Cheers.